Well, protests against Guinea's military junta have brought the capital, Conakry, to a standstill. Organisers say one demonstrator was killed in confrontations with security forces. The unrest began just before the head of the regional bloc, ECOWAS, said military rulers had scaled back their timetable for a transition to civilian rule from 3 to 2 years. But there's been no confirmation of this from the junta. The protest was called by a coalition of political parties and civil society groups known as the FNDC.
This protest is revenge against this regime. We thought the coup was a change, but no, it's just a change of facade. I support the FNDC. I support it in everything that it's doing.
Well, the National Front for the Defence of the Constitution, or FNDC, was founded in 2019. It aimed to oppose President Alpha Condé's plan to run for a third term by changing the constitution. It orchestrated months of demonstrations before Condé was eventually toppled in a military coup last September. Things went quiet then until May, when military leaders banned protests in public spaces. The FNDC started calling for demonstrations again, this time against the military junta. Well, let's bring in Christopher Fumunyo. He is the Regional Director for Central and West Africa Programs at the National Democratic Institute. He joins us now from Washington, D.C. Christopher, what exactly should we be expecting, given that the junta is refusing, it seems, to confirm this change of timeline we're hearing about?
Well, I think we have to consider today's demonstrations as a course-changing event in the sense that it shows to the world that the consensus that developed around the coup in September of 2021 is no longer there, that civil society and opposition parties are determined to have a say. And if the junta doesn't open up a more inclusive, more consultative, more transparent transition process, then we could be in real trouble in Guinea-Conakry.
Christopher, I believe you designed a program that aims to help facilitate political transitions. What advice would you be giving to both sides here in terms of trying to find a resolution?
In fact, in March of this year, NDI sent a delegation to Guinea-Conakry. I led that delegation, and we had good meetings with the head of the military junta, as well as with political party leaders, civil society, even traditional leaders. And we made some recommendations which went along the lines of making sure that every Guinean sector is represented or has its voice heard through this transition, and being able to put in place a timeline that's definitive, that's known to the public, with specific benchmarks that can be met to make sure that this military transition is the last in Guinea's history, because there's a real thirst in Guinea-Conakry for democracy and for citizens to have their rights, which is what triggered today's demonstrations led by the FNDC.
Well, you talk about voices being heard. I understand there have been talks between the groups organising the protests and the military junta, but those seem to have now fallen apart. So where does this go from here, given that we are seeing protests in the streets?
I think the ball is really in the court of the military, and they have to open up to sincere, genuine conversations. Because the reason why some of these talks haven't gone far is that the other interlocutors in Guinean society, whether it's civil society or political parties, feel that the engagement by the military is very cosmetic and that their recommendations and their suggestions are not being taken into consideration. And I think it will be extremely difficult for the military junta to have the civil society on its back, to have all the major political parties on its back, to have the international community on its back, and even the regional organization, ECOWAS, insisting that the transition period be truncated. You can't, even as a military regime, have all of these forces against you and still think that you'll be able to succeed in governing the country.
Well, let me then ask you about ECOWAS. Just how influential has the bloc been in trying to negotiate this, or is this truncated timeline simply wishful thinking on their part?
Well, I think ECOWAS has been handicapped because it's had to deal with 3 military coups in the sub-region all at the same time, and it's grappling with the situation in Guinea at the same time as it needs to pay attention to developments in Mali and in Burkina Faso in the Sahel. So ECOWAS is really handicapped in this sense. But I think the determination of the ECOWAS leaders to have a truncated timeline is something that gains or that has gotten the consensus of all of the leaders in the sub-region. And I think if they can succeed in Guinea, which doesn't have the external components of violent extremism that pertain or prevail in the Sahel, if ECOWAS cannot succeed in Guinea, it's going to have a harder time succeeding in the two other countries of Burkina Faso and Mali.
Indeed. Christopher Famunyo there, the Regional Director for Central and West Africa Programmes at the National Democratic Institute. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise and thoughts with us on Al Jazeera, Christopher.
Thank you for having me.